The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay, I'm going to give this a minute. I can see attendees are joining us. The numbers are just all logging on, and going to give a few seconds to allow people actually join our webinar this evening. There was a large number of people who registered for the webinar. The last I checked, it was in excess of 300. So I'm just leaving the numbers. I have a control panel in front of me here, Minister and Paul, and I'm going to leave it just click in for a minute or two. Barry, if you're listening there, you might tell me when it's completed, when you've given access to everybody.
I think they look steady now, Marianne.
Good to go.
You think so? Yep. Okay, great. So good evening, everybody, and welcome to our webinar this evening. I am delighted to host and chair this webinar with our Minister for Housing, Darragh O'Brien, and Paul Merriman from Ask Paul. And I suppose there's been a lot of interest in housing. It's the topic of debate on all the radio shows and all the TV shows, and I suppose it's of most interest, though, to people who actually want their own home. And coming out of a decade of undersupply, obviously, far too many people have been actually locked out of home ownership and are struggling, I suppose, to navigate what can be a complex task. Is the biggest investment most of us will make in our lifetimes, buying our own home. And I think there's a whole load of elements to it, but the financial one is a very significant one. And Housing for All, as the plan introduced by you, Minister, just over a year ago, sets out very ambitious targets in terms of a state-led, the biggest state-led housing programme in the history of the state. A plan that's going to deliver over 300,000 homes in a mix of private, social, affordable, and for the very first time ever, affordable cost rental. Everybody accepts that it takes 4 years from concept to actually somebody turning a key in a door to deliver homes, so it does take time. But the planning permissions are up and the commencements are up, over 40,000, I'm sure, planning applications, and the commencements far in excess of 25,000. So those numbers are very positive, and on a macro scale, they're very interesting. But I suppose for tonight, what I think the people who are logging onto this webinar want to hear is what help is there to help them deal with the financial costs. And Paul, I know you give advice every day. You're an independent financial expert and advisor. And I think what's really attractive, you say you take the jargon out of the financial discussion. Because for most of us, it's a huge investment, but it is there is a lot of jargon involved in discussing the various schemes and the various plans, but it's a big commitment on a personal level. So we've got about 60 minutes, less than 60 minutes now, to demystify it and to enable and empower everybody who's listening to the webinar tonight to understand the various schemes. So Minister, I might start with yourself. If you could talk to us maybe for a couple of minutes about how financially the state is helping people who have been locked out of home ownership to actually secure their own home.
Yeah, look, thanks, Mary, and look, welcome everybody, and it's great to have everyone here. I think what we want to do, obviously, is hear from you and take your questions. So I'm going to be pretty brief, and then we can answer questions as we go on. Just today, Mary referenced the government's housing plan, Housing for All. The difference with this one is it has money behind it to back it, to bring in real schemes that are going to help. And one thing I was really concerned about with all of the issues that we have in housing, and yes, there are many, is to try to put home ownership right back at the centre and within reach for people who are working and saving. Many of you, I'm sure, are renting, paying rents above the odds, or living with your folks and trying to save and are trying to feel, well, look, how am I ever going to buy that home? So what I've been focused on in the last 12 months in particular since Housing for All is bringing in very specific measures that can help and that are starting to help. So I'm just going to run through a few of them. First one being the Help to Buy grant, and many of you will be familiar with this because it's been around for quite some time. But what we managed to get agreed in the budget was that's extended for at least another 2 years. So what that is basically helping people get their deposit together. So up to €30,000, either on an individual basis or a couple, to be able to help to build up that deposit that you need to be able to buy the house. As Mary said, probably the biggest piece of expenditure that anyone is going to be involved in. So you can be sure now that that's actually in place, and that works as a rebate of the tax that you've paid over the previous number of years, up to a maximum of €30,000. And actually that's helped about 32,000 households so far to be able to buy their home. So that is still in place, and you can be assured it's going to be there for at least the next 2 years. One new scheme I brought in that people need to know about, and we're starting to see that, is the First Home Scheme. Now, what the First Home Scheme is, it's focused at first-time buyers, and basically it is where you get your mortgage and you have your deposit. And I'll use an example. Say if your mortgage and deposit totals 280,000, but the house that you were buying, a new home, was 350,000. The state will step in and bridge that gap by taking in equity, and that's called the First Home Scheme. And I'd encourage any of you to have a look at the website. It's a very simple application process. So effectively, you get your mortgage approval in principle, you upload it onto the system, then you'll get your equity cert. And we only opened this in July. There's been a fair bit of advertising around it online and on traditional media, but as of actually last week, in 5 months, we've had nearly 2,200 registrations for that scheme. And we've actually issued approvals for 671 homes. So they're real homes for people like you who are saying, well, I have my savings, I have my mortgage approval, but I'm still short. And that's where we will give the equity. Now, you don't have to pay that out until you sell the home at the very end. There's no interest between year 0 and 6, and a very small management charge of about 1.25% over the term post year 6. So we've looked at schemes like this in other jurisdictions and have tailored it to Ireland. And it basically means that you have a choice, that you can bridge that gap. And it's any new home anywhere in the country that you can actually go and buy using the First Home Scheme. And as I said, just even in 5 months, we've had nearly 700 households have got approval to do that. And we're seeing contracts issued and equity being drawn down for people. And that's a real assistance. And that's in place now. So I would really encourage you to have a look at First Home Scheme if you're short on that amount. And we have caps in the regions, like certain price caps that we keep under review as well. And that is something that I believe is, a really important assistance for people. It also applies to people, let's say, who might have gone through personal insolvency or divorce under what we call the Fresh Start principle, so that you can access this scheme as long as you don't own another property. Couple of quick things, and I'll conclude at that. Many people I've met in my job as ministers in TD out in Dublin Fingal would also say to me, look, I see an empty home on the main street in Swords or in Ballincollig in Cork, and if I'd help to be able to do that home up, I'd be able to buy it and afraid the cost of actually doing it up. So we've brought forward a grant now that's open right across the country, both in our cities, in our towns and villages, and for rural one-off homes that are vacant. €30,000 for a vacant home, €50,000 for a derelict home. And you can also apply for the SEAI grants on top of that. That's the Sustainable Energy Ireland Fund that's there for schemes. So we opened that in August, and we've had nearly 500 applications to it. It's a very simple application, and it's through your own local authority. It's not based on the value or the purchase price of the house. So again, and that's not just exclusive for first-time buyers, but it is for owner-occupiers, okay? So it might be someone right-siding or moving into another property. It will apply to above shop units too. And we've actually had a really good start to that. So you've got the Help to Buy grant, the First Home Scheme, and what we call the Creek Honaha Vacancy Grant, and that's available there too. Two other elements I just want to discuss is the local authority home loan. And it's not known by lots of people that there's a very good mortgage product available for people who can't get the mortgage amount that they actually need. And it's administered through our local authorities, our local councils. And that's a long-term fixed interest mortgage, very keen prices, but it's fixed interest over 20 and 25 years. And particularly if people haven't been able to access the mortgage amount that they need through your main street banks or mortgage companies, or effectively that you may have had some issues as well previously with regard to mortgages, you can actually apply for that mortgage through the local authorities. And there's over 250 million available there right now in mortgage lending through the local authorities. And the good thing, particularly when we're seeing in an interest rate environment where interest rates are going up, this is a very, very competitive fixed rate mortgage. Two final things, Mary, and then I'll hand back to you. The local authority affordable purchase. We've given monies to all of our local authorities to be able to bring forward affordable purchase homes, new homes that they will partner and they will build. And like that, we're putting up to 150,000 per unit to make sure that the sale amount is actually affordable. So I'll give you a couple of examples. In Lusk in North County Dublin, the house prices in the first scheme there starts at 166,000. In Boherboy in Cork, we're looking at prices up from around the mid 200,000s, depending on the house size. Again, these are focused through local authorities, and we've approved about 28 schemes across the country that will deliver just about 2,000 homes, and we intend to do a lot more. So information on that is available again through the local authorities, but they're very specific affordable purchase where the state steps in and effectively the local authority take that equity piece. Now, it's not a second mortgage. There's no interest on the piece that the state effectively owns, but it means basically that you're going to be able to go in and buy a home at an affordable rate. And the very final thing relates to cost rental, which didn't exist 12 months ago. And effectively what this is state-backed affordable rents, where we're able to partner with approved housing bodies and local authorities to deliver long-term secure rental, minimum 40 years tenure, and a minimum of 25% below the market. So we've already approved just short of 1,000 cost rental properties right the way across the country, and we'll be approving more as we move on. And this is actually a new form of tenure that I think is very much going to take hold. It's a continental European style of rental where the state actually supports the rent to keep it at an affordable price. So they're the number of things that we have open right now. And just really the importance of this type of webinar is that people can, one, get an idea for what's there, and two, ask questions about it. So with that in mind, I'm going to hand back to you, Mary, because I know people will have questions and Paul is going to come in. So thanks for the opportunity to talk to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Minister, for that. And Paul, I am going to turn to you immediately. I'm inviting people to send in their questions. Please use the function there to submit your questions. Well, Paul, I suppose I've been listening to the Minister, as everybody else has now, for the last couple of minutes, and I've been very involved as well over the last year or so in the changes that we've sought to make to housing policy. You know, I said we came out of a decade of undersupply, and we've an absolute unashamed objective as a party to restore home ownership and the possibility of home ownership. But even just to listen to the Minister, and as succinctly as he explained all the schemes, like, we're talking about 4 billion a year, right, for the next 5 years. You're talking about 300,000 homes. And then we talk about giving people up to 30,000 euros back of their taxes in a deposit. The mortgage offerings that are available, the first home share scheme, which gives people extra borrowing potential, or the local authority home loan mortgage, which helps people, giving people the fresh start, that principle. And that's before we start talking about the grants for the vacant and derelict properties, or for enhancing them by making them energy efficient, and the funding that we're putting into the local authorities to build affordable homes, and the introduction of affordable cost rental. I think the three of us, with all of our knowledge, can easily appreciate why everybody finds it all very confusing. So when people come to you and you demystify it for them, and you say you'll take away the jargon, where do you advise people to start? You know, somebody who's renting, somebody who wants to own their own home, where do you tell them to start, or how do they start? And I'll start taking the questions then and get them ready for you. But if you could spend a few minutes maybe giving advice, I think that would be really helpful to this audience.
Perfect. Excellent. Well, first of all, thanks very much for asking me along, Mary. Much appreciated. So look, when it comes to the mortgage application, the mortgage process, I suppose, with so much that's available from offer from the government and so much negativity in the press, it's very hard for consumers and mortgage and first-time buyers in particular to get very consumed and very bogged down by it all. But it actually is simple once you reach out and get advice. You're not supposed to know all these things. You're not supposed to be an expert in them as a homeowner or a first-time buyer going for them. It's a bit more difficult for single applicants, obviously, and joint applicants as well, which I'll touch on in a second. But there's some excellent benefits out there. Now, I will say before we get into all the benefits and what to do, it's very important that you focus, no matter what your financial plan is, you focus on your own situation, your life, and not be comparing yourself to your neighbours or other countries or jurisdictions, etc., etc. We are where we are. We've had a big meltdown nearly over a decade ago at this stage, and we're trying to work our way out of that. I know that can be frustration for homeowners, especially when they're going for the mortgage for the first time and they're probably listening to a bit of negativity that's out there. Now, I'm not trying to say everything is rosy, by the way, but I think it's very important to focus on what you can actually do in today's world and what you can affect yourself. So every homeowner, regardless of what you're going for, you're looking to get a mortgage, you're using the first home scheme, or whether you're going to use the likes of the Help to Buy scheme or even the local authority loan, which I'll get into in a couple of seconds. It's all about affordability. So every single person that's on tonight that's wanting to be a homeowner needs to prove to somebody that you can afford to pay your mortgage, your loan back. I think that's really, really important. So the first place you need to start is getting your affordability check. So you need to find out how much your mortgage is going to cost you, your loan is going to cost you. So let's use an example. Let's say you go on, you find out that you need a €300,000 loan and it's going to cost you €1,500 per month, for example. In that situation, you need to prove to the bank or the local authority that you can afford to repay €1,500 a month, usually by a combination of one or the other, or rent or savings. So if you've been renting for $2,000 per month, say, which a lot of people are, you're fine. Your affordability is great because you know your mortgage is going to be €1,500 and your rent for payment was €2,000. So you've shown your affordability to pay your mortgage. If your rent was only €1,000, which is probably impractical in today's terms, but if you're looking to only paying €1,000 in rent, it means you now have to top it up at about €500 or €600 in savings to show combined you could save and rent to €1,500 or more. And that's really what this is all about, showing the affordability. Now, a lot of people feel stuck in that they don't understand how deposits work. So I get a lot of people coming to us here at Ask Paul, and they're saying, I can't save for a deposit while I'm renting. You don't need to if you're going to buy a new home, if you're buying a house up to €300,000. Because with the Help to Buy will give you that 10% if you've paid enough income tax and third tax over the last 4 years. So if you're going to buy a property for €300,000, the government is basically saying, we will give you a deposit and therefore you don't need to save. So I think a lot of people that are trying to get out of rental accommodation already feel stuck because people are telling them they need to save their deposit when they don't necessarily if they're going to buy a new build. Now, if you're going to buy a new build and Help to Buy, you can actually go up to €500,000 in value, which is amazing. Now, in that case, you get 30 from the government and you need to save 20 yourself or get a gift from a parent or whatever your situation is going to be. So again, a lot of people feel locked, and as well as that, your affordability is probably sorted because if you've been renting, it's more than likely that your mortgage is going to be cheaper than your rent in today's environment. So people that are renting really have a get out of jail card if they can find the property right around that 300,000 mark. But obviously there's people on tonight that be from nearly every county hopefully in the country, so it obviously depends on where you're living and what you're trying to achieve there. But I do think that's a massive support and that people don't understand it. And like I said, tonight is about trying to educate people in the practical steps that they can make to actually get into home ownership. I think that's really, really important. The other thing to look at here is probably the local authority loan. I might just share my screen. Barry might just tell me in the background if people can see this. Give me 1 second. I'll see if this works. Barry, you might let me know if you can see the local authority loan there. So the local authority loan, I encourage anybody to go to the website that's on tonight and have a look at this. So this is up to a joint applicant up to €75,000 worth of income, or a single applicant, again, up to 65k. This is really good for single people. Good for people that have combined income as well. But it's very practical for single income as well. If you look at here and you go in, you click in join. This is the calculator. So join 2 incomes. And you select that, maybe, I don't know, if you live in Dublin, 320,000 maximum price, an income of person 1, let's say it's 40,000, an income of second person might be 35 to bring us up, or 34 to bring us up to that kind of max threshold. Monthly commitment 0, and interest rate option. Now, this is very important. I can't stress how good this rate is at 2.9%. I'm going to go into the ECB rates and what's happening in the markets now in a couple of seconds. But to me, this 30-year fixed rate is a steal. And it really is when you look at the markets. And you're looking at companies in the Irish market like Finance Ireland suspending all rates over 10 years, only over the last couple of months. So to be able to get a 25 or 30-year fixed rate in around that 2.9%, genuinely is extremely good in my opinion over the long term. And again, you can go on over 30 years here as well, which again is a big help to people for the longer term that they might need. So again, the system will completely come in and just calculate how much you can borrow in this instance. I'm trying to move my cursor here so I can tell me. I can't see the screen because I have a cursor in front of it. 1 second. So you see here, once you hit the calculate button, it will be able to tell you that you can borrow 288,000. And the monthly repayment here is going to be €1,200 fixed for 30 years. So that's phenomenal. You can also use this for second-hand property, which a lot of people don't realise. They think all the government schemes are for first homes only or for new builds. This scheme is actually open to both new builds, sell builds and second-hand property, which is amazing. So yeah, I think it's a really good option that people sometimes overlook, especially those that might be on a single income. Like I said, they're probably going to get more income from here than they will from the banks, which is really, really, really important for people to know. So like I said, there's a quick run of how the local authority loan works. So if you look at the two schemes in place, you're doing really well. And then if you look again, another minister has mentioned this already, the first home scheme where the government take a bit of an equity in the property. Again, in my opinion, this got a lot of negative press, but again, you have to focus on where you are as a person or a couple or where we are as a country. It's very well looking back 10, 15, 30, 40 years ago, but you have to look at where we are today and what systems are in place to help you get on the ladder. And as a financial planner and a mortgage advisor, that's what we try to do for people. Let's try and get rid of all the noise and look at what's available today to actually get you into a house. You can talk and talk and talk about the past and what it should be or it isn't. It is where it is. So I think it's very, very important that you look at the first home scheme. This is really good. Again, I do worry about the negative press and that a lot of people and a lot of opposition would have been saying that this is a second mortgage. And as soon as people hear that, they're turned off. When it's not, in fact, a second mortgage. There's a small management charge in the fairness, but it's really, really low, especially if you look at interest rates today. There's actually people out there that are going for mortgages and they should be dying to use the shared equity scheme if they can, or the first home scheme, because, you know, it's really, really cheap if you're borrowing up to maybe 20% of the value of the property. So everyone's going to be in a different space here. I won't give too many examples because everyone's going to be different, but I do think getting advice around the shared equity scheme, the first home scheme, is really, really important, and it really adds to really good sound financial planning for you into the future. Again, something if you're a single applicant, it's basically the government going on the application with you for the mortgage and give you a little bit of extra. So I think this is really important for people that might be on a single income or don't have anyone to go into the property with them. I think those people have been screaming for support over the last number of years. I think this is probably the biggest support they're probably going to get or have seen ever from any government. So I think it's great that it's there. And they're the three main schemes. But I think anybody that's looking to go as a first-time buyer really has to be concentrating on the actual mortgage process as well and going through the mortgage process. There's a lot of people predicting a crash. Personally and professionally, I don't think we're going to see it. I think the country is a completely different country than it was in 2007 and 2008. I think the central bank has done a relatively good job in relation to keeping lending at a sensible level with the caps they've had in. We have seen for first-time buyers, those caps have slightly increased from January. So from January, first-time buyers are going to be able to borrow up to 4 times their salary instead of 3.5 times their salary, which is brilliant. And that's going to give them a little bit of a hand compared to where they are this year. If the market does stagnate or maybe decline slightly, it will even be better news for first-time buyers, I suppose. But there is still that kind of supply issue. So I think you're going to see prices remain robust, especially in the major cities, as my prediction will be over the next couple of years. But look, like I said, you have to get all the schemes and all the benefits that are available to you to help you there. But I do overall think the main thing people need to look at is interest rates. I think I've heard a lot of people saying, don't buy now, wait for 2 or 3 years, the crash is coming. And we're just so scarred as a nation of what happened in 2007, 2008, that, you know, listening to probably the wrong people telling you what's going to happen, and this prediction of a crash, I just don't think will happen. And even if prices decrease, I'm going to use a mortgage example now, and I just want to do this not to be patronizing, but to try and educate people on how mortgages work. Remember that ad, Mary, years ago, I don't know what a tracker mortgage is. I think that should have been extended to I don't know what a mortgage is, because a lot of people don't understand the intrinsic working behind the mortgage. a lot of couples, a lot of people, single boys as well, going for a mortgage will be paying maybe 1,800, 2,000 rent. They'll see 13 or 1,400 on the mortgage and say, great, I can afford that. But they mightn't go for the right interest rate option. And that's why I love the local authority loan if people can qualify for it, because that 30-year fixed rate in today's market is it's exceptional value. And you think that this was brought in years ago at 1.9, I think it was at one stage, if I'm correct. And there's a lot of people out there that secured that 1.9 rate for 25 to 30 years, which was an absolute steal if you look at where the market is today. And again, that got a lot of negativity back then with everybody that jumped on the local authority, or the Help the Boy scheme, or what it's called back then. I mean, compared to where interest rates are today, they've got an amazing deal. They got onto the home ownership. They secured really low interest rates for 20, 25 years. But again, that was something that back then would have got a bit of negative press. Those people are now looking back saying, I got one of the best deals in the marketplace and the lowest interest rate that has probably ever been seen and ever will be seen in Ireland, in my opinion, for the very foreseeable future. So like I said, don't knock all the schemes just because people are. You have to look at them, what they mean to you and maybe your family as well. And it is really important. So just going to see, can I get my second screen up to give a quick tour of mortgages just for a second. You might let me know if you can see that mortgage calculation screen, guys.
Yep.
Yeah, you can. Okay, great. So I'm going to use an example here. Just what I'm going to do here on the right hand side is a property here, a mortgage rather, at 320,000 euros. So if you're borrowing 320,000 off the bank, the interest rate is 3.75. Now I've gone with, I think it's the Bank of Ireland 10-year fixed rate. I do think people need to be fixing for the long term, and I'm putting it over 30 years because a lot of young first-time buyers will probably go over that payment. You see here, the mortgage repayment is 14.81 per month. Again, probably less than the average person is paying in rent, so it's really good. But look at this. Over here, you see 213,000. That's what's going in this example back to the bank, or back to Bank of Ireland, that rate. So Bank of Ireland, you're going to borrow 320,000 over here, but you're actually going to pay them back a total of 533,000. This is based on a 3.75 fixed rate for 10 years only. So obviously in 10 years, you're going to go back to Bank of Ireland and get a new rate. We don't know where rates will be. I think they'll be higher. You never know. But at the moment, we know over that period of time, the mortgage cost is 213,000 is what you're going to be paying just in interest alone back to the bank, if it was to stay at 3.75 for the full mortgage term of 30 years. Now, wait till you see what happens here. The European Central Bank has gone up by 2% already, from 0 to 2% since July, and I think it might go up again by the end of the year. If the mortgage interest rate changes to 4%, let's say we go to 4.75 at Bank of Ireland, which I don't think is too far off what might be next year, to be fair. If you save that, look at the difference here. It's now 280,000. So it's almost 65 grand in the difference on interest. Now, why is this important? Because when people talk about the market and they're hoping or thinking that the market's going to crash, people are picking the good parts out of what happened in 2007, 2008. In 2009, 10, 11, and 12, you could buy property much cheaper than you could today. However, you couldn't get a mortgage. A lot of people have lost their income. I'm just saying, if we do go into that big recession, it's not going to be that easy to get a mortgage or pick up the property prices. So in that example I've just shown you, a 320,000 mortgage, let's say you're going for a property at 350k. That property would have to fall over 30%, and if interest rates go up by 1%, the client is still no better off because they're going to be paying more in interest, even though the property value has fallen. So it's not fair just to say, if property prices fall, I'm in. Number one, you mightn't get the mortgage, and number two, I'm pretty sure that interest rates are going to be much higher if it's the case that property is falling by over 20%. So it's very much a case, I'm not trying to fuel the property market here or keep the prices up, but it's very much a case, if you are thinking of getting on the property ladder, you need to be doing it today just because of mortgage interest rates. Forget about house prices, because interest rates is what's going to be the real killer here. It's the silent killer in the background of every mortgage. It's the amount of interest it's costing you. And we find that literally 8 or 9 out of 10, every 10 consumers that come to us don't understand how interest rates work in the background. They're just looking at that repayment, Mary, of €1,400 or €1,500. So like I said, don't just think that if markets fall or the property prices fall, that it's going to be easier, number one, to get a mortgage, and that you're going to be paying the same on your mortgage. You're going to be paying a lot more for that mortgage, and therefore a lot more interest over the term of the mortgage. So I'd be really encourage anybody to go sooner rather than later, in my opinion. I think if you're considering getting a mortgage next year, or trying to buy a property next year, you need to start the planning now. The banks are extremely under pressure with trying to get approval and principles out and trying to get loan offers out to people because they haven't really quite recovered from COVID-19, from the lack of staff, and obviously from remote working as well. So our service level agreements are slipping across the board on a monthly basis. It takes a long time to get an approval in principle and a loan offer out. So I'd always be saying plan as early as you can if you're thinking about getting on the property ladder. And lastly, before I go back to maybe the questions or hand back over, I do think people need to understand what's happening in the ECB. I know there's been calls for Patrick Lunnan to actually step in here and try and curb interest rates. It's out of his control. I mean, this is set by the European Central Bank. Those that are on tracker rates are going to get a substantial increase. And they've already got a substantial increase since July, and they're going to get them more into next year as well. We encourage people to fix for the long term. But also for first-time buyers coming into the marketplace, I do encourage you to really try and fix for as long as possible, those 7 and 10 years, minimum of 5, because the trap might be here that you come in at a low rate, maybe 2.5, 2.75, and when you come off in a year or 2 years from that introductory fixed rate offer, you could see a substantial increase. And this is set by the European Central Bank. It's not set by anybody in Ireland. It's the European Central Bank that sets those rates, and the banks have to pass them on. Will have to pass them on eventually. I do think you're seeing the main pillar banks, Bank of Ireland, Permanent TSB, and AIB. They've increased their rates. Permanent TSB only recently is Friday. AIB and Bank of Ireland have already increased their rates as well. So I think you're going to see a bit of a shock to interest rates next year once KBC and Ulster Bank have completely left the country. So I would be considering for first-time borrowers. Like I said, that's why I think the local authority loan is so good to be getting 2.9 fixed for 30 years. I'm going to have to say it. I think it's a steal in today's environment. So it is a really good benefit there. And if you couple that, I know you can't combine the two of them with the shared equity or the first home scheme. There's just so many good benefits out there. Don't let the negativity distract you away from getting on the property ladder. But interest rates up 2% already. European Central Bank since July, probably going to climb into next year again. And the reason the European Central Bank is doing that is it has to use inflation. It has to use interest rates to combat inflation. So basically what the European Central Bank is doing by increasing interest rates is sucking money out of the economy and making you pay more for your mortgage, which you can pay less in the shops and buying stuff, which takes the heat out of the economy. And I know a lot of first-time buyers find this confusing. They think that they're just putting it up to kick them while they're down with the cost of living increases. But the ECB increases is paying, short-term pain for hopefully long-term gain economically, so that inflation calms back down from that 10% mark. And you've seen this work really well in the States. They increase rates rapidly over there, and you see inflation starting to fall. So hopefully that will happen here over the next year or two. But I do think rates across the board will probably stabilise with this European Central Bank at about 2.5 to 3%. Then you put the bank's margin on top of that. So I think even after all the rate increases and when inflation comes back down, hopefully that 2.5, 3%. You're looking at mortgage rates of 4 to 5% in Ireland, I would have thought into the future. So like I said, keep going back to that 2.9 local authority loan. I still think it's ridiculous value. But look, I suppose I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm hoping I'm giving enough across there and what people can do. But remember, guys, for those that are in rental accommodation, there's two schemes there that literally, if you're buying a property, a new build for the €300,000, you probably don't need to save and you don't need a deposit because your affordability and the government's help under Help to Buy will basically get you out of that rental accommodation into a home if you can find a new build for €300,000. So I think that's great to be able to do, and I just don't think it's promoted enough, and not a lot of people know that. And they feel trapped, and they're not necessarily trapped in that situation.
Paul, that's great. Thanks a million. God, you dealt with both the macro and the micro. It was really, really excellent. And I think for everybody, you said at the start, every person's situation is individual. And the starting point for all of us, I suppose, when considering making such a huge investment and such a huge financial commitment, is to start with our own personal situation. So I'm going to go to some of the questions here. And I guess the first one, and this is a real housekeeping one, but I'm going to give this one to you, Paul, please. The question is, how much should I be saving monthly, realistically, to prove to the bank that I'm a suitable candidate for a mortgage? And will they take the rent I'm paying into account?
Yes, they will. Yeah, so the rent is probably the biggest one they're looking for. So, you know, on average, it depends across the country where you're buying, but you look at the average first time buyer loan around 280, 290. You know, you want to be saving somewhere between 40 and 50 and 100 euro. That can be savings and or rent, as I gave in the example earlier on. So what I encourage you to do is to jump onto just Google mortgage calculator, or pick any calculator out there and just put in, you know, 300,000 loan over 30 years. You see there that was 1,400 euro in my example for 320,000. So in that example, you want to be showing the bank 1,400 either by pure rent, pure savings, or a combination of both, which is really good. You know, so if you're renting, most people should be able to make the affordability up between rent and savings.
Brilliant. That's great, Paul. Minister, what criteria do I need to meet to qualify for the First Home Scheme? Is it limited to a certain amount of people in a certain area? And I think this question also you can take this one at the same time. What schemes are available to a divorcee who cannot access a stake in their former family home until the children are older?
Okay, just Mary, on the First Home Scheme, and again, I'd encourage people to have a look at the website. It's a very well put together website with a calculator on it. It'll tell you exactly what you get, because as Paul has said, everyone's circumstances are individual to them. But effectively, we haven't put in an arbitrary salary cap. Okay, that's important. There's some other alternative proposals were put forward that if couples were earning over 70,000, that they couldn't get it on an affordable scheme, or over 50,000 as an individual. So effectively, what the First Home Scheme does is you show what mortgage approval you've got, and you show the gap between your mortgage approval, your deposit, and what you need. And under a certain price ceiling, so to give you an example, in Dublin, the price ceiling for a home is 450,000 for a house and 500,000 for an apartment. And that shows then effectively that, you know, as long as you can show that you have your mortgage approval and you meet the affordability threshold, we're not bringing in any arbitrary salary caps on that. So it particularly works well for singles. Okay, so you know, where you can see where you can help there. The maximum we'll give is 30%, so a third of the value, just short of a third of the value of the new property, if you're not using Help to Buy. But if you're using the Help to Buy grant, which is the tax rebate of up to 30,000, you can use that, and you can get up to 20% equity in your new home. Now, it has to be a new build at the moment, and it could be a self-build. So we had a lot of requests as well for people in more rural areas who want to build their own home. This scheme will apply to them as well, and we're working through that. But the good thing is we've already seen this actually work. As I said, just short of 700 approvals. And it's a simple process where we're looking at the turnaround time for equity stake requests of, in a matter of days, 2-3 days, they're turned around. And then you can go off and buy which property you want. So, you know what I mean? You've got your mortgage approval, you have your equity cert. We've done all the legal works with all the main banks as well. So we're seeing contracts already being issued and drawdowns in mortgages. So I'd really encourage people to do that. Second question there, excuse me, Mary, relates to someone who is, let's say, divorced. And we have brought in what's called the Fresh Start Principle. Okay, and the Fresh Start Principle means that you can access the First Home Scheme. You could access the Croí Cónaithe vacancy grants, which is up to 50,000 euro grants, as long as you don't own another property. So you would have had to gone through divorce, you would have legal separation, or indeed in personal insolvency, it also applies there. So it's effectively a fresh start within that. Now, where people still retain ownership of a part of a previous home, unfortunately, that won't apply to you at the moment. But we're looking at other mechanisms of how we can expand the scheme into the future, and we are reviewing and we keep the price ceiling caps under review. We found a couple of anomalies, particularly in the Greater Dublin area, Metropolitan Cork as well, that we're looking to change. But what I would say to you is, look, Paul has already mentioned the local authority home loan too. That will apply to second home purchases as well. The Fresh Start Principle absolutely applies there also, and we've changed the income rate and level, particularly for singles. We've upped that to 65,000. It used to be just 50,000, so we've upped that as well. So, you know, all of the schemes that we have, with the exception of the Help to Buy at the moment, the Help to Buy doesn't have the Fresh Start Principle. The others do at the moment, and I'd encourage people, certainly on the the First Home Scheme to really go in and check that out, because that's starting to work. And we're seeing people actually turning the keys in the door of their home. A lot of people who were stuck renting basically and didn't think that they would ever get a chance to buy a home, and it's working really well for them.
That's great. Thanks, Minister. Paul, can I come back to you for a moment? Question in asking, is it possible to get a mortgage for a modular house? Are they treated differently to traditional built homes? So talking about prefabricated or modular buildings, do mortgage lenders treat those type of properties differently and consider them differently when giving a mortgage?
It depends on the structure, but you know, likes of wooden log cabins and that being put up on sites, and even if there's it's a planning site, they're not mad about the banks. So typically have to be normal construction. But again, I have seen one or two where they're kind of prefabricated houses that are actually built in Germany, they're imported in, they're actually okay. But yeah, it's typically the log cabin stuff that people want to stay away from. The main thing that the banks are concerned about is when you're going for self-build, actually it's really good for self-build home, actually, for advice for people, is that number one, you obviously need your 10% deposit. You can use the Help to Buy for that, which again is excellent. But the banks would like to see a contingency of cash there as well, especially in the current environment, the cost of living, increasing the cost of material increases. So somebody is building a property, say for €300,000, and they're using the Help to Buy for 30k for a deposit, that's fine. They want to have another 30k in reserves to show the bank, just in case. The last thing, and the bank is really worried when it comes to self-build these modular homes, is that they're not complete, and therefore the bank is left with an asset that's not secure, it can't be sold on. So the last thing the bank wants when it comes to a self-build is a situation where the house is half complete and you run out of money, or they can't lend you any more money because the site's not worth anything to you or them. Also, I'm trying to give as much advice as I can here. When it comes to self-builds, get this a lot where people have started work and then they go for the mortgage. This is a big no-no. You need to go for the mortgage first. You can't say, you know, I'm a foreman on a site and I'm going to put the driveway in, I'm going to dig the foundations and lay the foundations, and I'm going to put my first 50k into it, then go get a mortgage. Because every part of the house building process has to be signed off by an architect. The architect is there to protect the bank, to let them know that the house is being built in accordance with the planning permission, and also to a structural standard, high standard. So if you're doing it as an extra for yourself in the evening times and you build up to the roof and then you run out of money and try and get a mortgage, you won't. So seeing people caught with this as well. So it goes back to what I said earlier on. This is all about planning, making sure you get advice extremely early in the mortgage buying or house building process. So yeah, hope that helps.
Brilliant. That's brilliant, Paul. Thanks for that. Minister, and I'm really conscious we're coming towards the end of our hour, so I just have a couple more questions. Minister, can you avail of more than one scheme if you are a first-time buyer? And then a local question around Dún Laoghaire-Rathdown Local Authority, and when will Dún Laoghaire-Rathdown Local Authority introduce the Affordable Housing Purchase Scheme?
Well, actually, I was in Dún Laoghaire-Rathdown today, so I'll answer the second question first. We're actually out there with the Taoiseach today, looking at Shanganagh Castle, which is out in Shankill, which is the biggest state site being built in about 20, 30, 40 years nearly. And there'll be affordable, there'll be cost rental, and there will be social there too. So I'm working with Dún Laoghaire-Rathdown. That's going to deliver 597 homes, the majority of which are affordable. They've started work on it. The planning permission's through. The first homes on that site will actually start to be delivered in the first quarter of 2024. So they're actually all on site now. Contractors are in place, but all local authorities are being encouraged, and I'm asking them to bring forward what sites they have that they can use what we call an affordable housing fund, that we give a subvention per house for them to actually bring them on and make them affordable. Dún Laoghaire, I know, is tight land-wise, but having said that, all of them are bringing them forward, and actually the Shanganagh Castle one is the biggest site that's under construction now at the moment with 597 homes. First question, Mary, can you access both schemes? Like the First Home Scheme, which is bridging the gap between the finance you have and what you need, operates with the Help to Buy grant as well. Okay, so the Help to Buy you can get if you're a first-time buyer. You can use the First Home Scheme as long as it's a new build as well. Local Authority Home Loan will also interact with the Help to Buy grant too. So basically you can use a combination of what is there and what is available of the number of schemes that we have. The vacant property grants are interesting, and we've a lot of applications all the way across the country on it, where, you know, we haven't linked that grant to the value of the property. So in some parts, obviously, we've high property prices in urban areas, less so in some of our regional towns and villages. And we're seeing real interest in that area, like good properties that are on main streets that have been vacant. As long as the home was built before 1993, you get certified with the local authority that it is, you get your €30,000 grant. And really importantly, you can also get your SEAI grant. That's worth up to 29,000. So if you think about it, you get a vacant home, €30,000 grant, you may have some savings yourself or not, you get your mortgage for it, and then you can also get your SEAI grant, which is to do your windows and your energy retrofit piece as well. So very significant in that one alone. And if it's a derelict house, and the council have said it's derelict, it's actually 50,000. And that will also apply, as I said earlier on, in our cities too. So I was out with you in Stoneyballer recently, Mary, and you can see homes there that are being brought back into use. So in a real short space of time, people are starting to access those as well. And some of these are really well-built properties there and well worth going after. That's why we wanted to give that help and assistance to sort of reduce the cost of actually the refurb of the property and bringing it back into use.
That's great. Paul, can I come back to you? Question in from somebody who is living here. They're from South Africa originally. They've been living here and working here for 6 years, but they're paying a very expensive rent, and they feel like they can't save for a deposit. So they want to know, how will they know how much Help to Buy they'd qualify for?
Great question. So the first thing anyone needs to do, actually from a financial planning over point of view, everyone needs to be registered on, my opinion, the revenue.ie website under the My Account section. So that's where you're going to go for your Help to Buy. I'll actually calculate it for you. I'd recommend waiting until January because it looks at the previous years. So the 4 years will include 2022. So if you go into January, go into the revenue.ie site, go into My Account, and under Help to Buy, it will tell you, give you a certificate basically saying you qualify for 25, 22, whatever it is, up to a maximum of €30,000. And you can link two people together on that with two PPSNs. So it'll tell you combined what you can get in as well. You can calculate combined what you get. So some might get 14 to 15,000 each, or it might be 20 and 5 or 20 and 10, etc. And so that's basically where that person needs to go to double check what they're going to claim for the Help to Buy. It's that simple. Just make sure they paid enough tax.
Very good. Unusual to hear anybody encouraging people to pay more tax, but you know, there's a silver lining in every cloud. Paul, you put that very nicely.
May I just say as well, just on the Minister's point in relation to the derelict homes, just to say again, not a planning needed there for the mortgage application for the banks, so they do consider them self-built. So just a little bit more complicated than going for your average mortgage. So if you're thinking of using it, I'd get in quickly with the banks or a financial advisor to make sure you're in all your ducks in a row. Yeah.
Would you say it's fair to say, Paul, that it's never simple buying a home, right? It's never simple buying property. So the simplest route is buy a new build. Yeah. If it's a new build, it'll be more streamlined, the process. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, I think the major issue with trying to buy a second-hand property is you're caught in a chain of people purchasing properties usually. You know, so you're buying the house off somebody, unless it's a derelict house. In fairness, you know, there's no one living in it. Obviously, it can be a little bit easier. Then again, some of those derelict properties have probate issues. You know, where it's still in probate or willed or his family and different things. But generally speaking, yeah, buying a new build, I mean, it's just you and the builder, and that's it. So yeah, it tends to be a little bit easier to plan at times and date. Again, you're probably just looking at people. Probably the first thing people are going to say is apply them. That's probably going to be the issue. I think as well with interest rates increase, I think a lot of people that are in houses already mightn't be moving as quickly. So I do think the second-hand market might dry up a little bit sooner than the new builds. So yeah, I would think going that way is more practical. You're obviously probably going to get more of efficiently built houses as well from an energy point of view with the new builds these days. I mean, it's amazing what they're doing with houses now compared to 10 years ago, never mind 20 years ago. So that would have to be taken into consideration, just the cost of running the energy for that house over the next 10 odd years or whatever it is. So yeah, I think it should be an easier process.
Okay, that's great. And Minister, I suppose then, Paul has talked about the interest rate issue. The other big one, of course, is supply. And I suppose just in terms of increasing supply and the increasing supply of new builds, can you just talk very briefly before we finish up in the next minutes of how that is looking for the end of this year and into next year?
Sure. Look, because overall, look, we want affordability to be part of the housing market, and that it's there and it permeates housing. So one of the things was these schemes that are all very targeted at those who need them, and it's really useful that people know and are aware of them and start to use them, is we do need to get overall supply up. So we've had about 10, 12 years of very significant under delivery, both in private and in social homes, and we need both, frankly. So this year we targeted 24,600 new build homes, and it's about building up from 20,000 last year. With COVID, obviously with the shutdown, that had affected it quite badly. But the good news is we will exceed that target this year. We'll probably do in the region of 26, 27,000, maybe a bit more than that. Now we need to scale that up further to 29,000 next year. The outlook into next year is decent, but not without its challenges. One of the things that was one of our guests here asked this evening was about modular or rapid build homes, and we do have to look at more modern methods of construction. And I've visited a number of companies around the country who are building really good homes, excellent quality homes as well. And they're just more efficient to build. Some of them, they're not necessarily cheaper, but you can build quicker. So the big focus next year is actually ensuring that we, take that step up from what we targeted 24,600 to 29,000 next year. But really where we need to be at is averaging at least 33,000 new build homes per year. But the other big thing, if I could say, and we're determined to do that, I might add, so I just want to let people know that. The other thing is the vacant stock piece, and looking at what, particularly above shop, if you look at our cities, right the way through the country, there's a lot of empty space there that, if we can crack that nut, a lot of people would like to live there too, living in the cities, breathing a bit of life back into them. That's why I'm encouraged by the start to the Croí Cónaithe vacant and derelict grants, that even in 3-4 months, we've had hundreds of people apply for them. And I want to assure people, we'll continue to tweak schemes. We don't have all the solutions in one year. You need to actually see what the lay of the land is to tweak schemes going forward, that we just make sure that one of our main priorities is that people who want to own their own home can actually buy one at an affordable rate, be that a new build home, if we can help to buy a second-hand home through the local authority home loan, but bringing vacant stock back into use. And the last few years, actually, we're seeing a decrease in the number of vacant homes. That's good, but there's still too many. And there's still more that we can do in that space. So yes, new supply is crucial, and that will help drive affordability, no question. More affordable homes built by our local authorities too. And as I said earlier on at the start, we've approved about 2,000 of them. We need a lot more, and we're going to keep doing that, and we're approving more and more every week as we move on.
Look, thanks a million, Minister, and thanks very much, Paul, as well. And I just want to thank everybody who joined us tonight for this webinar. I think it has been a really good discussion. Paul, you certainly demystified and de-jargonized the conversation, which was very welcome. What's very clear is that there is very significant resources. Every resource available is being used to try and increase supply, to empower our local authorities to build new homes and to deliver not just affordable purchase, but also affordable cost rental homes in line with the social housing delivery targets, which are the most ambitious in the history of this state. The funds that are being provided to help people get a deposit, get a mortgage, own their own home, be it a new build, or actually the most sustainable and efficient way is obviously taking an existing built vacant property and bringing that back to life. And again, there's the grants available to help people bring them up to a modern or near to modern energy efficiency standard. Thanks everyone who joined tonight. We will send a message to you for everyone who registered with links to all these schemes. We thank you for your time, thank you for your interest, and come back to us if you've got any questions. Paul, thanks a million. Minister, good night to you all.
Nice.
Night, everybody.